Hi, everyone. My name is Blake Cadwell. I am the co-founder at Soundly.com, and today I'm joined by Dr. Amy Sarow, and we're going to be talking about hearing aid styles today. Dr. Amy has agreed to bring some hearing aids into the video. She'll show some examples of various styles, and if you're someone who's just started searching for hearing aids, you might be seeing a lot of different form factors, some that sit behind the ear, some that sit inside of the ear. And if you're wondering what the differences are between them or which one might be right for you, stick around. This is your video. So let's just start things off with a quick overview. Dr. Amy, can you explain, I guess, some of the big categories of hearing aid styles that folks might see if they're doing their research?
Definitely. So we'll talk about three main categories here. We're going to talk about the first one is a behind the ear hearing aid. So this could be a receiver in the canal or RIC or BTE option. And then we're going to talk about custom hearing aid options, which come in a range of sizes from larger pieces all the way down to invisible or nearly invisible options. And then we'll talk about auditory implants, which include cochlear implants and bone anchored hearing aids.
So let's start with the most common hearing aid style, which sits behind the ear. And there are two big categories, BTE, which is a little bit higher powered, and then a receiver in canal. And maybe you can talk to us and potentially show us what a hearing aid that sits behind the ear looks like.
So a lot of people like the behind the ear styles, whether it's a RIC or a BTE, because it is comfortable for most people. There's a wide fitting range. So if you have normal low frequency hearing, there's ways to fit that to keep it natural sounding. So we have the receiver here and this little piece that goes in the ear and this piece that goes behind the ear. So I'm just going to put this behind my ear.
Yeah, I'll say from experience, the receiver and canal hearing aid is the one that I wear the most. I've tried both in the ear, which we'll get to in a moment, and behind the ear styles. And that open fit tends to be more comfortable for me. I still get those low frequency sounds in. It feels more natural, and it is comfortable for all day wear. Let's talk about category number two, which is in the ear hearing aids. So if you prefer to have a hearing aid that sits inside of your ear, you want to talk to us about some of the options that exist within that category.
Yeah, so here I'm going to show you some different options and I'll explain. So this one is the larger size. It's called an ITE hearing aid. So I'll put that one in so you can see. So this fills up my ear, and that is a custom hearing aid that's going to have the most options in terms of a custom. Typically, it's going to be able to connect via Bluetooth to your phone, to an app. You'll probably have push buttons or a wheel on there if you need to adjust something, if you prefer to do it manually. For people who have dexterity concerns, manipulating a larger piece out of the ear is sometimes easier than maneuvering that piece behind the ear and then the piece in the ear canal there. So that is the ITE. Then we have an ITC, which is a little bit smaller here. And depending on the manufacturer, there may be some rechargeable options, but some of them are going to be with the traditional batteries. The ITE, some will be rechargeable. And then you have a CIC, which is smaller, and this one's going to look more discreet because it has this gray here. So it looks more like a shadow in your ear, and it's got this removal string. And then we have the really small one. So this is a titanium. So this is the smallest option that I have here to show you. Now, the smaller we go, the less is going to fit on the inside, which means that if we're looking for the smallest cosmetically discreet option, it's not going to necessarily have the Bluetooth capabilities that larger one would. And so if you want to be connected to an app, that's something you'll want to think about there.
Yeah, it makes sense. So as people are thinking about sort of the primary two big categories, there's a hearing aid that sits behind the ear. Two big options within that. You've got receiver and canal, which is right for many people, but if you have more severe or profound hearing loss, you might end up with a BTE, which is a slightly different design and has more power. And then within in the ear, all of the options that Dr. Amy just shared, that are from the largest to the smallest, and some of those features are going to fall away as you get smaller and smaller, all the way down to invisible hearing aids, which sit all the way in the ear. So let's move on to the final category that you talked about, and that's implanted products, kind of bone conduction, and then cochlear implants. Can you talk to us about how these products work and who they're right for?
So with bone anchored hearing aids, these are going to work best for somebody with a conductive hearing loss, who's perhaps not able to wear a traditional hearing aid. Maybe they need their ear canal to be free to allow oxygen to come in, to prevent, further infection in the ear, for example. There's other reasons why, but that's one of the most common reasons. So bone anchored hearing aid is going to be a piece that is placed behind the ear, and there'd be it'll sort of snap on to something called an abutment, depending on the type you have. And then that's going to pick up the sound and it will send it right behind your ear to the inner ear. A cochlear implant is a little bit different. And so that one is going to be a piece will be implanted under the skin. And then we have a processor that's worn on the outside that looks a little bit like a hearing aid. And those are going to be best for people with sensory neural hearing loss, and they would have to go through an evaluation. And we've talked about this recently in another video about what to consider if you're thinking about cochlear implants.
Yeah, and cochlear implants often are for those who can no longer receive benefit from hearing aids. So typically someone who has more severe hearing loss, and we will link that video in the show notes. So that gives us sort of a summary of our three big categories of hearing aid design. You've got behind the ear styles that come up over the ear and have sound piped into the ear canal. You've got in the ear styles, which go from sort of large to very invisible. And then you have implanted styles, which we just discussed. So thank you, Dr. Amy, for this description of each of these hearing aid styles. And to you, the viewer, we wish you the best in your research.